We are squarely in the... Okay, I want you to just stop what you're doing for a second. Take a breath. Look around. We are squarely in the middle of the 2030 college football season right now. If you walk through a tailgate lot this morning, you smelled the charcoal, you heard the drum lines warming up, you saw the flags waving. On the surface, the pageantry looks exactly the same as it did 5, 10, 20 years ago. The bands are playing Seven Nation Army, the students are painting their faces. It feels like business as usual.
But if you scratch even a millimeter below that surface, I mean, it has been a completely different story.
Exactly. Off the field. The tension has been thick enough to cut with a chainsaw for months. We've all felt it. It's in the rumors swirling on message boards. It's in the whispered conversations in athletic director offices that leak out to the press. It's in the absolute bone-deep exhaustion from everyone involved in the sport. For the last few years, it felt like we were all standing on a cliff edge, just waiting for the ground to crumble.
It didn't just feel like that. That was the reality. I mean, the structural integrity of the sport was gone. It felt like something had to break because the system we've been operating under for the last decade, this absolute Wild West era of unchecked NIL money and the transfer portal just spinning like a revolving door, it wasn't just chaotic. It was mathematically and emotionally unsustainable. You just cannot run a multi-billion-dollar industry on vibes and handshake agreements forever.
And then the news dropped. The hammer finally came down. The chaos has an expiration date. We finally have the announcement that is going to change absolutely everything. We aren't just getting a new rule book, we are getting a new world. We are talking about the 2031 reset.
That's the term everyone is using, the reset, and it fits perfectly. This isn't a tweak. No, it's not the NCAA adding a clock rule to shorten games. It is a complete structural overhaul of the second most popular sport in North America.
So let's unpack this massive bombshell. The headline is staggering, and I still have trouble wrapping my head around the numbers. A corporate consortium, calling themselves the Collegiate Football Governance Consortium, or CFGC, which sounds very intimidating and official, like something out of a sci-fi movie, has purchased the commercial and operational rights to FBS football and the college football playoff. They bought it directly from the NCAA. And the price tag, you might want to sit down for this, over $40 billion.
Yeah, it is a number that is almost impossible to contextualize. $40 billion. To put that in perspective, that makes this the single most expensive restructuring deal in the history of American sports. It dwarfs NFL team purchases. But when you look at the asset college football, it actually kind of makes sense. The NCAA didn't just lose control. Effectively, they sold the keys to the castle. They're retaining oversight of other sports like basketball and Olympic sports, but they have conceded the power product. They've handed over football to a private entity.
And the mission statement from this new CFGC group is pretty clear. They want to stabilize the sport. And the clock is ticking. The changes take effect in July 2031, just in time to the 2031 season. So we have the rest of this current 2030 season to process this, play out the string, and then brave new world.
Exactly. And stabilize is the heavy lifting word here. If you look at the last 10 years, stable is the last word you would use to describe college football. It's been volatile. So our mission for this deep dive is to look at exactly why this happened, why the old model collapsed, and then we're going to pull up the new map. Because come July 2031, the conference map now is gone. We are looking at a complete regional realignment.
Oh, I cannot wait to get to the map. It is wild and yet somehow makes total sense. It's like looking at an old puzzle that finally got put back together. But before we get to the fun stuff, the rivalries coming back, the new conferences, we have to eat our vegetables. We have to understand the mechanics of the collapse. Why are we here? Why was the 2020s model so broken that it required a $40 billion corporate takeover to fix it?
To understand the cure, you have to understand the disease. The sources are pretty clear on this. The NCAA's power didn't erode all at once. It wasn't one bad decision. It was a steady erosion, bit by bit, over a decade. And the two primary agents of chaos were the NIL collectives and the portal.
Let's talk about the collectives first, because initially the idea of NIL name, image, and likeness sounded great. Let the quarterback sell autographs. Let the linebacker do a car dealership commercial. That's fair, right?
In theory, yes. But that's not what happened. Very quickly, these collectives, which were often set up as separate LLCs or even nonprofits to dodge specific university regulations, evolved into de facto payroll departments. But they were payrolls with no salary cap, no contracts, and no oversight.
Right, it wasn't market value. It became an auction.
Precisely. In a professional league like the NFL, there's a salary cap. There is a draft. There is a collective bargaining agreement. In the 2020s college model, You had boosters simply bidding against each other. Oh, State University is offering you $500,000, we'll offer $600,000. And because there were no contracts binding the player to the school for more than a year, that bidding war happened every single semester.
And that leads us to the other side of the coin, the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
Combined with the NIL money, it created a situation where you had total roster turnover every single year.
It was a labor market with zero friction. Imagine a software company where the entire engineering team could quit on Tuesday and go work for a competitor on Wednesday because they offered a slightly better signing bonus. And there was no non-compete clause, no contract duration, nothing. That is what coaches were dealing with. And the NCAA, every time they tried to enforce a limit, every time they said, hey, maybe you should have to sit out a year if you transfer twice, they got dragged into court.
And they lost every time.
They lost because of the Sherman Antitrust Act. The courts looked at the NCAA and said, you are not a government regulator. You are a trade association restricting the earnings of workers. Once that legal precedent was set, the NCAA was powerless. They were a policeman with no badge and no gun.
And it wasn't just the administrators complaining about this. We have some fascinating voices from the inside in our source material. These are anonymous coaches reacting to this news right now in the middle of the 2030 season. And let me tell you, the tone isn't sadness. They aren't mourning the NCAA.
Not at all. The overwhelming sentiment from the coaching community is relief. It's like they've been holding their breath for 5 years and finally got to exhale.
There's this one quote from a power conference head coach that really stuck with me. He said, I spent more time re-recruiting my own roster than scouting opponents. That's not coaching. I mean, think about that. Imagine trying to prepare for a game against Georgia or Ohio State, but instead of watching film, you're in your office begging your starting safety not to enter the portal because a collective from another school just texted him an offer.
It is wildly inefficient. It's burnout central. That same coach added, development was dying. That's a crucial point that fans often miss. If you can't keep a player for more than a year, you can't develop them. You can't teach them a complex system. You can't help them grow in the weight room over 3 years. You're just assembling mercenaries every August and hoping they gel before September.
And if it was bad for the big schools, it was a nightmare for the group of 5 coaches. We have a quote here from a G5 coach who said, every good season became a punishment. Think about how messed up that incentive structure is. In any other walk of life, success brings rewards. Here, he said winning 8 games meant losing half the roster by January.
That is the definition of a Birkin system. Success should build momentum. You win, you get better recruits, you build a program. But in the model we've been living in, if a smaller school developed a star, say a fantastic wide receiver at a school in the MAC, a bigger school with a bigger collective just bought him. The G5 became a farm system for the power conferences, but without the compensation that a farm system usually gets.
There's also an assistant coach who is painfully honest about the lie of NIL. He said, NIL became a lie. It started being about bidding. And I think that's what fans felt too. It stopped being about, hey, buy a jersey with my name on it, and started being, who can write the biggest check to get the left tackle?
And that transparency issue is huge. Fans knew money was changing hands, but nobody knew how much, nobody knew who was paying it, and it felt dirty. It felt like the sport was losing its soul, not because players were getting paid. Most fans are fine with players getting paid, but because it was happening in the shadows, in this unregulated, chaotic way.
So the consensus is that the sport had drifted from amateurism to billion-dollar economics, but it was trying to run on an amateur chassis. And the wheels didn't just fall off, the chassis exploded.
Exactly. The structure didn't support the reality. So now the CFGC comes in, and who are they? They are a mix of media companies, tech giants, and infrastructure corporations. They have the capital $40 billion worth, and more importantly, they seem to have the legal insulation to actually enforce rules. They aren't a trade association of schools. They're owners of a league. That is a massive legal distinction.
So let's look at what this new governance structure looks like. Come July 2031, what are the new rules of engagement? How does this actually work?
First, there's a strict separation of church and state. FBS football becomes a distinct entity from other NCAA sports. So the volleyball team, the swim team, the gymnastics team, they aren't governed by the CFGC. They stay under the NCAA umbrella. That allows for specificity. You don't have to make a rule that fits both a 300-pound lineman and a tennis player.
Which makes sense. Football's a different beast. It generates the revenue, it has the collision aspect, it has the roster size, it needs its own rule book.
But here are the guardrails everyone is talking about. These are the things that are supposed to stop the bleeding. First, NIL reform. They aren't eliminating payment. The sources are clear on that. It's not going back to 1990. But they are moving from booster-driven collectives to a unified NIL compliance infrastructure.
Okay, unified NIL compliance infrastructure sounds like a lot of corporate buzzwords. What does that actually mean for the player?
It means regulation. It means standardization. Instead of a shadowy collective offering a bag of cash, there will likely be standard contracts, salary transparency, and clear rules about what marketing work actually needs to be done. It turns it from a bribe into a job.
But the big one, the one that has fans buzzing, is the transfer limits.
Yes, this is the pivot point. The sources say that strict limits on outbound transfers are in the works. Note the phrasing, in the works. They haven't released the exact bylaws yet because we are still in the 2030 season and this starts in July 2031. But the intent is crystal clear. Roster continuity.
But wait, how can they do that? Didn't we just say the courts ruled that restricting movement is illegal? How does the CSGC get away with banning transfers if the NCAA couldn't?
That is the $40 billion question. The thinking is that by centralizing the ownership, by making it more like a league and less like an association, they can collectively bargain these restrictions. If the players eventually have a voice, or if the contracts are structured as employment contracts with non-compete clauses, then you can restrict movement. You can't just quit the Dallas Cowboys and go play for the Philadelphia Eagles mid-season. The CFGC wants to bring that level of contract stability to college.
And honestly, as a fan, even if I worry about the players' rights a little bit, I get the appeal. It's hard to root for laundry. You want to root for guys you've watched grow up in the program. You want to see the freshman become the senior leader. That narrative arc is what makes college sports special.
Exactly. When you strip away the narrative, when it's just a random collection of guys for 4 months, you lose the emotional connection. The CFGC is betting $40 billion that fans will pay to have that emotional connection back.
And the third guardrail is the lock. Conference stability standards. No more waking up in July to find out your rival joined a conference 3 time zones away. Memberships will be locked, requiring unanimous approval to change.
Stability. That is the word of the day. They are trying to pour concrete around the sport so it stops shifting under our feet.
But before people panic that everything is changing, there are some things staying the same, right?
Yeah.
We aren't losing the actual game.
No, and that's important to stress. This is a renovation, not a demolition. The college football playoff remains at 12 teams. The selection committee is still there. Bowl games are still happening. Scholarships and eligibility rules remain largely the same. So when you turn on the TV in September 2031, it will still look like college football. It's just the architecture around it, the conferences, the contracts, the governance that is being retrofitted.
Okay, so that's the governance. That's the boring boredom stuff. Now, I want to get to the visual. I want to talk about the new world map. Because this is where it gets really interesting. This is where every fan listening right now needs to pull up the mental image of the country.
Let's pull it up. This is the centerpiece of the deep dive.
Yeah.
This is the 2031 map.
Okay, so looking at this map for the 2031 season, the theme is glaringly obvious. It screams regional realignment. The super conferences spanning from New Jersey to California, gone. Dead. We are going back to geography. We are going back to sanity.
And thank goodness for that. The super conference era was a logistical nightmare. It was a cash grab that ignored the reality of travel, time zones, and academic schedules. This map prioritizes driving distance and historic hatreds.
Let's start in the Northeast.
Yeah.
We have a conference simply called the American. But looking at this roster, this isn't the AAC we used to know. This is basically the classic Big East revival with a Joe Paws Northeast grit feel.
It is. Just listen to this roster and tell me what you feel. Penn State, Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Temple, Maryland, Rutgers, Buffalo, Syracuse, Boston College, UConn, UMass, Cincinnati, Army and Navy.
I feel cold just listening to that.
Yeah.
I feel snow games. I feel physical, ugly, defensive football. And I love it.
It creates a very specific identity, that Northeast grit identity that got diluted when those schools were scattered across the ACC and Big Ten. Look at what this fixes. For years, Rutgers and Maryland were geographic outliers in the Big Ten. They were making flights to Nebraska. Now, they are playing schools they can take a bus to.
And the rivalries. The Backyard Brawl Pit in West Virginia is a permanent conference game again. That is one of the nastiest, most passionate rivalries in sports, and we get it every year.
And look at Penn State. For decades, Penn State has been the unrivaled outlier in the Big Ten. They didn't really have a natural heat partner now. They're in a cage match with Pitt, with West Virginia, with Maryland. It gives them a regional home that makes cultural sense.
And having Army and Navy in there, that adds so much gravitas. It adds tradition.
It does. It signals that this conference values history. It's a very smart packaging of the Northeast Corridor.
Speaking of the Big Ten, let's move to the Midwest. The Big Ten is returning to its roots, but there is one massive, earth-shattering addition that jumps off the page. It's the one name that changes everything.
It's the white whale of conference realignment.
Notre Dame. Notre Dame is listed as a full member of the Big Ten.
That is the bombshell. For decades, Notre Dame cherished independence. They were the exception to every rule. But in this new $40 billion landscape under the CFGC, consolidation was inevitable. The economics of independence probably just didn't math out anymore compared to the revenue share of this new Big Ten.
And if they have to join a conference, they belong in the Midwest. Look at this roster. Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Indiana, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa, Iowa State, Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas State.
It is a powerhouse. But notice what it did. It absorbed the old Big 12 North. It took Kansas, K-State, Missouri, Iowa State, and Nebraska and reunited them. It consolidates the entire Midwestern power base into one block.
And think about the rivalries. Notre Dame versus Michigan is back as a conference game. Notre Dame versus Purdue, the Shalala Trophy. And then you have the revival of the Kansas versus Missouri rivalry, the border war, playing out in conference.
It just makes complete logistical sense. No more flights to Los Angeles for Rutgers or Maryland. No more flights to Seattle for Iowa. It's a bus ride conference again. It is the Corn Belt plus the Rust Belt. It is the heartland of football.
I have to admit, seeing Notre Dame finally take the plunge is shocking, but seeing them play Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue every year, that feels right.
It feels like history.
Okay, moving south. The SEC. The motto here seems to be Southern dominance. But wait. Something is missing.
Or rather, something has been removed.
The roster. Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Louisville, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and a new addition, Memphis.
Memphis getting the call-up is huge for them. They've been knocking on the door for years. But the headline is who isn't there. Texas and Oklahoma are gone.
They kicked them out. Or moved them.
Moved is the polite term. In this regional reset, the logic was to keep the SEC purely deep south. Texas and Oklahoma are culturally slightly different. By moving them out, the SEC tightens its footprint.
I actually love this. It makes the SEC feel more pure. It's compact, it's hostile, it's the land of sweet tea and terrifying defensive lines.
And adding Louisville creates that natural rivalry with Kentucky in conference. The Governor's Cup becomes a conference game. It just tightens the map. Every game feels like a neighborhood brawl.
Okay, now let's talk about where Texas and Oklahoma went. Because the Big 12, oh man, the Big 12 is basically the Southwest Conference reborn. If you are a fan of King of the Hill or Friday Night Lights, this is your conference.
This might be my favorite part of the map. The logic here is undeniable.
Let's read the roster. Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, Texas, A&M, Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, SMU, Houston, North Texas. And then dragging in Arizona and Arizona State to round it out.
The Lone Star State plus neighbors. But the biggest news here, the thing that will have people dancing in the streets of College Station and Austin is the healing of the fracture between Texas and Texas A&M.
They are back in the same conference. The rivalry is mandated.
For a long time, that split was a sore spot in college football. It was petty. It broke a tradition that went back a century, getting Texas and A&M back together alongside Tech, Baylor, TCU. It turns the conference title race into a battle for the state of Texas.
It's going to be absolute carnage, and I love it. The Thanksgiving weekend games are going to be legendary. And frankly, for the fans, this is the dream. You can drive to almost every away game.
That's the key. This map respects the fan experience. If you are a Texas Tech fan, you can drive to Baylor. You can drive to TCU. You don't have to budget for a flight to West Virginia or Florida. It reconnects the community of the sport.
And let's go west. The Pac-12. It's back from the dead.
Yeah.
The Lazarus Conference.
The resurrection. The Pac-12 dissolution was one of the saddest chapters of the realignment era. It left the West Coast completely abandoned. But here, geography wins out.
The band is back together. Washington, Washington State, Oregon, Oregon State, USC, UCLA, Cal, Stanford. But they've bolstered it with the best of the West. Boise State, Fresno State, San Jose State, San Diego State.
This fixes the biggest absurdity of the last few years, USC and UCLA playing in the Big Ten. Logistically, that was a nightmare for non-revenue sports and for fans. Imagine being a parent of a UCLA softball player and having to fly to Pennsylvania for a Tuesday game. It was madness.
Now, USC plays UCLA, they play Stanford, they play Oregon. The West Coast is a self-contained ecosystem again.
And adding Boise State. That's spicy. They've been knocking on the door of the Power Club for 20 years. They finally get a seat at the big boy table, and they bring a rabid fan base with them.
Then we have the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. And looking at the map, they really leaned into the Atlantic Coast part.
They did. Rostered Virginia Tech, Virginia, Wake Forest, Duke, UNC, NC State, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Florida State, FAU, Miami, UCF, USF.
Oh, look at that concentration of Florida schools. FSU, Miami, UCF, USF, and FAU. That is a royal rumble for the state of Florida every single year.
It's a recruiting goldmine. But also, look at the North Carolina block. UNC, Duke, Wake State. They kept the core together.
It feels like a very basketball-strong conference, too, but for football, having that Florida-Georgia-Carolinas corridor is huge.
And again, notice the geography. No California schools, no Texas schools. It is strictly the Atlantic Seaboard. It reduces travel wear and tear on the athletes significantly.
We also have the Mountain West, which looks really fun. It's like the time zone conference.
This is a great league. Utah State, BYU, Colorado State, Wyoming, Nevada, UNLV, Air Force, New Mexico State, UTEP.
With a holy war. Utah versus BYU. Back together.
Preserved regionally. And the Rocky Mountain Showdown, Colorado versus Colorado State. This conference owns the mountains. It's a distinct time zone, a distinct culture. It connects the schools that deal with altitude and isolation.
And we can't forget the Group of Five and the others. The MAC is the MAC.
The MAC is the cockroach of college football in the best possible way. It survives nuclear war, unchanged. Kent State, Akron, Ohio, Toledo, the stable bedrock of the Midwest. Tuesday night, Amacash is safe.
And the Sun Belt seems to have split into divisions?
Yes, a clear West-East split. West has Southern Miss, UAB, Troy. East has App State, Coastal Carolina, Liberty, James Madison. It's a very strong G5 league that focuses on the Deep South and Appalachia.
And Conference USA holding down the fort with Tulane, Louisiana, UTSA, and finally, the Independents.
Just one.
Hawaii stands alone.
Which, geographically, is the only one that makes sense to stand alone. You can't put Hawaii in a bus ride conference.
So summarizing this map, the era of the Super Conference, where you need a plane ticket to get to a conference game, is dead. The 2031 map is all about driving distance, historic hatreds, and regional logic.
It's a correction. The market tried to stretch the sport across the entire country for TV dollars, and it snapped. This map admits that college football is a tribal, regional sport, and it puts the tribes back where they belong. It acknowledges that a fan in Alabama cares way more about beating Auburn than beating Minnesota.
But of course, you can't drop a $40 billion bombshell and expect everyone to just nod and smile. The reaction has been, let's say, divided. It's been emotional.
Divided is putting it mildly. It's been a war zone on social media.
We have some fresh fan poll data here. 52% support, 31% oppose, 17% unsure. So a slim majority is on board, but a third of the fan base hates it.
Let's look at who supports it. The data shows the supporters are saying, this is what college football used to be.
Right. They are driven by the rivalries. They are the people saying, I can actually drive to road games.
Yeah.
And there is a huge element of relief regarding the transfer portal. One fan quote here says, I stopped learning players' names because they were gone the next year. Huh. That resonates. I think a lot of people felt disconnected from their own teams.
It does. Stability is a powerful drug when you've been living in chaos. But look at the opponents. 31%. Their argument is philosophical. Corporations don't belong in college football.
They fear the minor league NFL atmosphere. And honestly, with a corporate consortium running it, it's hard to argue it isn't becoming that. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck.
There is also skepticism that this resets the playing field. One critic said, they're calling it stability. I'm calling it locking in the hierarchy. If you are a small school, you might feel like the door just slammed shut. If the conferences are locked, how does a Cinderella story rise up? How does a Boise State happen again if the map is frozen?
There's a fascinating generational split in the data, too. Older fans, 35 and up, are embracing the return to regionality. Younger fans, they are more skeptical.
Younger fans grew up with player empowerment. They view the transfer limits and corporate oversight as restricting the athletes. They see the players as the product, and they think the product should have freedom. Older fans view the team as the product. It's a clash of values.
And the media landscape.
Yeah.
The talking heads are having a field day with this.
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith went full Stephen A. on this.
He did. He called it inevitable. He said the NCAA got pumped by the courts and exposed by NIL. His take was, you adapt or get replaced. He views this as pure capitalism doing its job.
Harsh, but accurate. Then you have Kirk Herbstreit. He's usually the voice of reason. He focused on the guardrails. He's saying this isn't about turning it into the NFL, but stopping the bleeding. He seems genuinely relieved that the chaos is ending.
Herbstreit is looking at it from a competitive integrity standpoint. He wants the game to make sense again. He wants to be able to analyze a matchup without checking a ticker to see who quit the team that morning.
Pat McAfee was interesting. He validated the fear. He admitted the soul is gone. But he argued the soul was already sold in smaller, uglier ways. At least this is transparent.
That's a cynical but powerful point. We were pretending the sport was pure while money was changing hands under the table. Now the money is on the table. Is an honest corporate league worse than a dishonest amateur league? That's the question he's posing.
And Paul Feinbaum, well, Feinbaum is Feinbaum, he said this is the bill coming due. The NCAA abandoned control years ago.
And he's right. Nature abhors a vacuum. When the NCAA stepped back, chaos stepped in. Now the corporations are stepping in to clean up the chaos.
So bringing this all together, we have a $40 billion purchase. We have a new map that restores regional sanity. We have strict rules coming in July 2031 regarding transfers and NIL. But is this good? I find myself oscillating between excitement for the map and dread for the corporate overlords.
That's the ultimate question. The word stabilize keeps coming up. The expert synthesis here suggests that the sport is making a trade, a massive trade. It is trading the chaotic freedom of the 2020s for the structured corporate control of the 2030s.
It feels like a deal with the devil, but maybe the devil's the only one who can pay the bills.
The sources suggest that without this deal, the sport might have eaten itself alive. The coaching burnout, the fan fatigue, the legal battles, it was a sinking ship. The CFTC is patching the hull, but they are also putting their own captain at the wheel.
So we are currently in the 2030 season. We have a few months left of the old way. And then come July 2031, the transfer limits kick in, the new conference letterheads get printed, the CFGC takes over.
And for the first time in a decade, when we look at the standings in 2031, the teams will be back where they geographically belong.
It's a strange feeling to have the logo on the letterhead change to a corporate one, but the feeling on the field return to something traditional.
It's a paradox, but maybe it was a necessary one.
Here's where it gets really interesting to think about the future. We spent decades worrying that money would ruin college football. We thought the big TV deals, the NIL checks, the millions of dollars, we thought that was the poison. But in the end, it took the biggest check in sports history, $40 billion, to buy back the regional traditions we thought were lost forever.
It's the ultimate irony. We bought our past back with the currency of the future.
Is it possible that selling out was the only way to save the sport's soul?
That is the question every fan has to answer for themselves.
I want you, the listener, to pull up that new map. Look at your team. Look at who they are playing next year in 2031. Imagine the road trip. Imagine the rivalry game. And ask yourself, was the trade-off worth it? Because ready or not, the reset is here. Thanks for diving into this. We'll be watching the rest of this 2030 season with a whole new perspective.
Indeed, it's going to be a fascinating finish.